Shabbat Shalom. It's a pleasure to be back and sharing the pulpit with Rabbi once again. Thank you for inviting me. Our service begins with Shalom Aleichem on page 627. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaShofet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei HaMlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bolechem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei HaMlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Ni L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei HaMlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seitechem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei HaMlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Shabbat Shalom, and it's great to have my dear friend Cantor Gutchin back with us. We entered the sanctuary to welcome Shabbat. Within these walls, we sit surrounded by numberless generations. Our ancestors built the synagogue as a visible sign of God's presence in their midst. Throughout our long history and our endless wanderings, it has endured. This synagogue is a beacon of love, beacon of truth, justice for all humanity. Its presence guided our ancestors through lives of righteousness, holding up to them a vision of their truest selves. Now we, in our turn, come into the sanctuary to affirm the sacredness of our lives. May we enter this place in peace. May holiness wrap around us as we cross its threshold. Wariness, doubt, the flaws within our human hearts, the harshness of the weak, let these drop away at the door. In the brightness of Shabbat, let peace settle upon us as we lift our hearts in prayer and we continue with our candlelight blessing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner Shel Shabbat.
And it's our great pleasure to welcome the great Kaiser Sam Tannenbaum in honor of his birthday to lead us in Kiddush. And for those who are able or those who want to rise in spirit, we do it together. Come on, champ. Wine cup. Thanks, champ. Just want everybody to know before we continue with our service, and he knows what I'm about to say, two great moments in my rabbinical career. My second year in San Diego, Bill Goldberg, who won 71-0 for WCW. It was his nephew's bar mitzvah, and he had an aliyah. He was about this big. He was champion, and then we have the great Kaiser. Great things can happen when you decide to become a rabbi or cancer in that regard. And we continue. These are the days when we seek things for ourselves and measure failure, but what do we not gain? On Shabbat, we seek not to acquire, but to share. There are days when we exploit nature as if it were a horn of plenty that can never be exhausted. On Shabbat, we stand and wonder before the mystery of creation, and there are days when we act as if we care nothing for the rights of others. On Shabbat, we remember that justice is our duty and a better world our goal. So we embrace Shabbat, a day of rest, a day of wonder, and a day of peace. And we continue with Romemu.
Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu l'har kodesh. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu l'har kodesh. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu l'har kodesh. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu l'har kodesh. Lechadodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lechadodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor v'dibor echad hishmiyanu elam yuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad shemu tiferet v'litila. Lechadodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lechadodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lecho v'nelecha ki mekor ha'beracha berosh mikedem nesucha sof ma'aseh v'machshavatechi lach. Lechadodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lechadodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri kiva orech kumi uri shidaberi kivod Adonai alayich nigla.
We rise together to greet the Sabbath Queen.
Boi v'shalom ateret v'halagam v'simcha u'v'tzohalot tochem unei am segula. Boi chala lechadodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lechadodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela.
Please be seated. Teach me, O God, a blessing, a prayer, on the mystery of a withered leaf, unripened fruit so fair, on the freedom to see, to sense, to breathe, to know, to hope, and to despair. Teach my lips a blessing, a hymn of praise, as each morning and night you renew your days. Lest my day be today as one before, lest routine set my ways. And we continue with our Chetzi Kaddish.
Yitkada v'yitkada shemei Rabba Dialma divrach yirutei v'yamnich malchutei Mechai yechon uv'yom Mechon uv'chayei dechal beit Yisrael My gala uvizman kariv v'imero Amen. Yehi shemei Rabba mevorach leolam lomei olamaya yitvarach yitvarach ve'yishtabach v'yitvar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha richu le'ela min kol birchata V'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran b'yalma v'imero Amen.
And we rise.
Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? Ya-la-lai, la-lai, ya-la-lai, la-lai. Yalla la la la, 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 yalla la la la.
Everything within himself. There is one who leaves the circle of herself and sings the song of her people. There is one whose voice rings with the song of humanity, hoping for the highest perfection. And there is one who rises even higher, united with all creatures, with all worlds, filling the universe with song, Nivarech, let us bless.
Morechu et Adonai, Hamevorach, Baruch Adonai, Hamevorach, Le'olam Va'ed, Le'olam Va'ed. Yalla lai lai lai, 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 yalla lai lai lai.
Please be seated. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzivaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. And blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening. Baruch atah Adonai, Hamariv Aravim. We continue with Ahavat Olam.
Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amecha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נהגה יומם ולילה. מאהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. 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 ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there's no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. We continue with our Michal Mocha.
Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 la. Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha ne'edar b'kodesh, norah tehilot osei feleh, norah tehilot osei feleh. Malchutecha ra'u vanecha, bokei hayam lifnei Moshe, ze'eliyanu ve'amru, ze'eliyanu ve'amru, Donayim loch le'olam va'ed, Adonayim loch le'olam va'ed. Mi chamocha באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלף, נורא תהילות אוסף אלף. Ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la.
Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will.
Baruch atah Adonai, hapores sukat shalom, shalom aleinu me'akol mamo Yisrael. Atah Adonai, hapores sukat shalom, shalom aleinu me'al kol amo Yisrael. Sukat shalom, shalom aleinu me'al kol amo Yisrael.
We are a people in whom the past endures, in whom the present is inconceivable without moments gone by. The Exodus lasted a moment enduring forever. What happens once upon a time happens all the time. We continue with Vishamru.
Vishamru, Vishamru, v'nei Yisrael, et HaShabbat, la'asot, et HaShabbat, לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל, את השבת, לעשות את השבת, לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת, לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. Shamru v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat la'asot et HaShabbat לדורותם ברית עולם.
Prayer invites God's presence to suffuse our spirits, God's will to prevail in our lives. Prayer might not bring water to parched fields, nor mend a broken bridge, nor rebuild a ruined city. But prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart, rebuild a weakened will. We rise in spirit for tefillah.
Adonai sefata tiftachu fi yagid hilatecha. Eternal God, open my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Hasadim Tovim, V'koneh HaKol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, U'mevii Geula Livnei v'neihem, L'ma'an Shemo b'Yahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshia u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, ve'ezrat Sarah. Atah gibor li'olam Adonai, mechaye meitim, atah rav lehoshia, mashif haruach, umorid hagashem, mechalkeh chayim bechesed, mechaye meitim berachamim rabim, zomech noflim verofech oholim, umatir asurim, umekayem emunato lijenei afar, michamocha ba'gevurot, umido melach, melech memit umechaye, umatzamiach Yeshua, v'ne'eman atal hachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai mechaye hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, ukdoshim b'chol yom yehalelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh.
Please be seated. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. We continue. Grant us peace, your most precious gift, O eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocate among the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of every land. Plant virtue in every soul, and may the love of thy name hallow every home and every heart. Praised are you, Eternal One, who blesses our people with peace.
Shalom Rav, הישראל עמך תשים לעולם שלום רב הישראל עמך תשים לעולם כי אתה הוא מלך אדון לכל השלום כי אתה הוא מלך אדון לכל השלום שלום רב הישראל עמך תשים לעולם שלום רב הישראל עמך תשים לעולם וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך שלום רב הישראל עמך תשים לעולם שלום רב הישראל עמך תשים לעולם תשים לעולם תשים לעולם
We take a few moments for silent prayer.
והגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי אדוני צורי
We're at this moment in our service where we take time to think of those in our community, those who are in need of healing of body or spirit. On this Shabbat, we especially think of Rose Anderson, Linda Applebaum, Cindy Bailey, Katie Bates, Harold Seitlin, Deborah Chargois, Sunita Costa, Orit Cohen, Helene Davidson, Soviani Ray Edwards, Hannah Lillian Fox, Elaine Gross, Josie Hatfield, Bart Kolber, Elizabeth Morgan, Norman Morgan, Jan Milet, Beth Scher, Chrissy St. Charles, Mitch Schneiderkraut, Elena Stern, Adam Terrell, John Ohar, Jesse Weisberg, Elisa Rosemer Whitehead, Edgar Zimmerman. For those names mentioned out loud and for those names that are still on our hearts, we continue with a prayer that unites us together during the most darkest times with our Misha Berach.
May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. 2 weeks ago, we studied Parshat Beshalach, and for the most part, we understand this Torah portion to be the pinnacle moment for the Jewish people. And this is the redemption from slavery. But the great question that happens after Exodus 15, where we celebrate our redemption from slavery, is what's next? What are we supposed to do now that we are free? We are free from the shackles of slavery. How do we function? How do we live? How do we treat one another? What are next steps? And after all, this was the mission of God, Moses, and Aaron to redeem the people Israel. Last week's Parsha, in Parshat Yitro, in honor of Moses' father-in-law, we understand this Torah portion to be seen as the genesis of the Israel people. This is the beginning of Israel becoming a nation. In this parasha, there's two main themes. One, if we remember, this is where Moses is complaining that he believes that it's only him who can adjudicate every single case before him. And this is when his father-in-law pulls him to the side and says, "Boy, chick, I understand that things are tough. We got to learn to delegate responsibility. It's better for you, and all the more so, it's better for the people of Israel that they get fair and adequate justice." But the second part of this parasha, we're given the 10 Commandments. From this parasha, this is where the Torah clearly states that in order for Israel to be a cohesive nation, a cohesive society, there must be laws and must be enforced regarding the realm of economics, regarding the realm of structure, and especially for civility and structure. But for these Israelites, this idea of torts, precepts, other forms of laws, it's completely novel. I think for us, we need to imagine years of slavery and then trying to process a totally new world filled with new sets of guidelines. And maybe for us, we relate to this when we're thrown into the lion's den, something new in our lives where perhaps we're no longer in charge and we're given a new set of guidelines to live by, and the fear and excitement to do these well and have great fear or concerns regarding the consequences we don't live up to our expectations. But sometimes when we get hit with something new, something really hard on us, I think we all desire a little compassion, a little kindness, something that gives us the courage to say, it's okay that if we fail, but our kindness, our enduring love will pick us up, will teach us to get back on the right path, and we always get that second, third, and fourth chance to make it right. And this is where our tradition, this is where Judaism becomes a genius legal code where all areas of our life that are intertwined with Kedusha, with holiness, but also intertwined with torts and laws and civil structures and codes. But ethics and compassion, they find their way in, allowing Israel to process this new adventure. And when we looked at the 10 Commandments, specifically the first 4, it's all about faith, kindness, and compassion and belief. The first 3 of these commandments, they're about belief, about believing in the oneness of God, the concern not to worship idols, to accept this oneness, for God will be with the people as they wander for 40 years in the wilderness. But then we get the great 4th commandment. And this is speaking to the beauty of rest, remembering and sanctifying Shabbat. And this is a gift that the Israelites has always sought. We understand this 4th commandment as being that if God created the world in 6 days, then all the more so should the people rest on the 7th day, just as God did. But our rabbis teach us that this is the gift again that the Israelites needed in their new world. After generations of being slaves in Egypt, this is the rest that they finally got. To be away from work, to be away from fear and anxiety regarding the busy lives. This is a day where they get to take that breath to be with family, to spend that time when so many of us need more than ever. And now we enter in this week's parashah, Mishpatim, which is very similar to last week's. It's a continuation about how the Torah will be intertwined with issues of Kedusha, issues with holiness, but also how we're supposed to take secular ideas and use them in our lives regarding lost and found property, perhaps speaking to assault and battery. But again, it's compassion and kindness in order to give the Israelites courage that they need during this time. For Reformed Jews today, I think the first question we need to ask, what does this mean for us? How do we continue to process an engagement with these spiritual precepts and ethical commandments at the same time? Is there a way in which we can continue to intertwine the Torah as it's originally intended? And finally, how can we complement these 3 parshiot that empathize with novelty, where compassion in our lives must be paramount more than ever? For us, this compassion, that's holiness. It's not so much about religious elevation, holier than thou, or high levels of piety. It's taking the time to understand where we can use goodness, inclusivity, to people who need it more than ever. And I want to draw our attention to a very important verse found in Parshat Mishpatim, Exodus chapter 22, verse 20. You shall not taunt or oppress a stranger, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall not cause pain to any widow or orphan. Now, the basic understanding of this teaching in the Torah speaks to the responsibility of compassion. It's how we treat other people, those members in society who are the most vulnerable, the widow, the orphan, who need comfort more than ever. And then again, the plain reading of the text speaks to the idea of how we treat a foreigner in our midst. And we can see this in contemporary issues that have political consequences. But nevertheless, this is why we take from these commandments and understand what do they mean in our lives today. But our rabbis make this teaching much more deeper. They don't understand the stranger. In Hebrew, the Hebrew word is ger. They don't see it as someone who crossed borders, who have a new form of immigration or new nationality. It's rather the important and vital commandment of inclusivity. And they understand the stranger as one who willingness decides to return to the Jewish people. And for those who have seen our conversions, I don't like to call them conversions, I like to call them returns, on the mystical idea that we were once all present at Sinai, and that one's Jewish Shama has returned to them. That one who returns to Judaism, this is a ger, but someone who was special in our community. It was special for one 1,000 years ago when Rashi speaks to the ger, and someone who returns to our community in today's age. This is where Reformed Judaism, I think, shines the best. The importance of inclusivity. It's when someone comes into these beautiful sacred walls and feels that they can be part of something, even though that they weren't born into Judaism. It's this extra level of compassion and responsibility to hold ourselves accountable, to make sure that we don't have any form of elevated piety because we think that we were born Jewish. And a great teacher, the Or Chaim, remembers that Jews have this temptation to look down on those who convert to Judaism because they don't have the lineage from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But the Or Chaim easily goes after us who think about this. Then we were mired in the spiritual muck of Egypt. We completely lost our ways. So for us, as we process laws that speak to holiness and torts, this is the law that makes us stand out the most. It's inclusivity. It's kindness. It's compassion. It's about not who's better than the other person. That all members of the Jewish community, they are equal. And each chapter, as we receive more teachings from the Torah, we must be mindful of this critical teaching, to live it daily in our lives, and remember that this was the original tension when we became a united people in this parasha. Shabbat Shalom. We rise in spirit for Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות אדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. When cherished ties are broken and the chain of love is shattered, only trust and the strength of faith can lighten the heaviness of the heart. At times, the pain of separation seems more than we can bear, but if we dwell too long on our loss, we embitter our hearts and harm ourselves and those about us. The psalmist said that in his affliction, he learned the law of God. And in truth, grief is a great teacher when it sends us back to serve and bless the living. We learn how to counsel and comfort those who, like ourselves, are with sorrow. We learn when to keep silent in their presence and when a word will assure them of our love and our concern. Thus, even when they are gone, the departed are always with us, moving us to live as in their higher moments they themselves wish to live. We always remember them now. They will always live in our hearts, and they are always an abiding blessing to all of us. On this Shabbat, we recall the yahrzeits of Albert Eskenazi, Francis Weber Bierbaum, Lillian Van Balen Black, Marlene Bledsoe, William Blyweis, Michael J. Blonder, Morris D. Blumenthal Sr., Casel Turner, Harry Cohen, Marks B. Cooper, Alan Denson, Richard Diamond, Cora S. Dorn, Dottie Epstein, James Forrest Farguson, Stella Fetter, Lee Gotthelf, Morris William Green, Daniel Greenspan, Samuel Grossberg, Clarence Hagedorn, Marie F. Harrell, A. Chief Harris, Janet Cypress Harris, Keith Hewell, Bernard Holzer, Rosalie Hervich, Rose Jacobson, Susie Jaffe, Louis Kaplan, Bertha Kern, Magda Beckman Cruz, Sonia Damsker Lefkowitz, Bert Levin, Myrna Landau Levine, Jane Marks Levy, James Michael Luger, Eva Margolin, Bruce A. Mayer, Paula Michael, Louis Moore, Lincoln Newfield, Mary Patrick, Nathan Petrovsky, Patty Rubenstein-Bazitz, Paul R. Rich, Arnold L. Roseman, Abraham Roskin, Dorothy Roth, Mitchell Rubenstein, Irene L. Russakoff, Albert Shanasi, Barbara Schwartz, D. Riley Stewart, and Hyman Yasmin, and our heartfelt condolences in the recent passing of James Witt, uncle of Lindsay Leibovitz, Angela Lichtenstein, wife of Lee and mother of Alan and Will, and daughter-in-law of Joyce and Joe, Gloria Sag, mother of Dr. Ken Sag, Scott Leader, son of Jerry and Shirley, and father of Jenny and Olivia, and brother of Hugh. Joyce Fox, dear friend of Linda Gutchin, and Thomas Varnon Cal, brother of Mark Cohen's dear friend, Terry Cal. We rise together as a united congregation for our Mortars Kaddish. Yikadal, Vikadash Shemei Rabbah,
Amen.
Biomad Ivrach, Hirote, Vamlich Malchute, Vechayachon, Vyomechon, Uvkai Dekol Beit Yisrael, Bagala Uizman Kari, Vyamru,
Amen.
Yehei Shmei Rabbah, Mevarach, Liolam Olamea Maya, Yitbarach, Yishabach, Hitba'ar, Titramam, Hitnase, Vita Dar, Vita La, Vita Lao, Shmei Kudsha,
Richu.
Le'ela Minkol Birchata, Beshirata, Tushbechata, Benechamata, Damin Ram Yoma, Vyamru,
Amen.
Yehei Shlama, Rabbamin Shemaya, V'chaim Aleno Ve'kol Yisrael, Vyamru,
Amen.
Osei Shalom Bim Romav, Huyasei Shalom, Aleno Ve'kol Yisrael, Vyamru, Amen.
Ve'imru,
Before we conclude with Adon Olam, I want to thank my absolute dear friend, Cantor Bernie Garchin, for being with me. I just love having you next to me, sharing the bima, and take us home.
Thank you.
Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasa V'chefso Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, Ve'acharei Kichlot HaKol, Levado Yimloch Nora, V'hu Haya, V'hu Hove, V'hu Yeh B'tifara, V'hu Echad V'ein Sheni, L'hamshil Lo Li'achbira, V'li Reishit, V'li Tachlit, V'lo Ha'oz V'ha'misra, Yalla la la la, 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 yalla la la la. Ve'hu eli, ve'chai go'ali, ve'tzur chevli, ve'etzara, ve'hu nisi, u'manosli, menat kosi, ve'yom mekra. Yalla la la la, 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 yalla la la la. Ve'yado avkid ruchi ve'eti shan ve'ya'ira ve'im ruchi geviyati Adonai li ve'lo ira. Yalla la la la, 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 yalla la la la.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos, Rabbi.